everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about the police. The incidents that have appeared on our screens from Leicester and from Birmingham, from Smethwick, from Nottingham and Leicester in Derby, all of those instances, they have had an impact on all of us. One of the areas that we were most concerned about, though, was the police response. We know that the Hindu community in the United Kingdom, as a community, we are very much law-abiding citizens. And so more often than not, very few of us have an interaction with the police, very few of us engage with the police, and fortunately, very few of us are ever experiencing arrests, etc. One thing that did come to the forefront was that the majority of us, after the event and during the event, had very little ideas on what to do whilst it was happening. And today we're going to bring together a few people who have got experience of those aspects. The policing response that we normally assume is going to be the response is that if we phone the police, they will come, they will provide protection, they will secure any property and prevent harm. But that was totally different to what we witnessed on the day. And there are a number of reasons why that happened, and it's important that we understand those reasons. So the first thing I'm going to do is to share with you a report and a statement produced by our dear brother-in-arms, a gentleman called Vinod Poppet, who is British Hindu Voice in Leicester. Unfortunately, yesterday he has a fever and his vocal cords have been very, very raw, so he's not able to speak, but he's given me a statement to read on his behalf. Vinodji, we wish you well and hope you recover very quickly. The statement reads as follows. This is Vinod Poppet from Leicester. The communal disturbances in Leicester have shaken up the very core of the city, and it's claimed to be a beacon of peaceful coexistence where diverse communities live and celebrate side by side. Following the cricket-related incident on Melton Road, the British Hindu Voice immediately wrote to the police pointing out that the incident must not be seen from a faith perspective, as some mischief makers were trying to make it so, and it should be treated as a simple law and order issue. A request was also made that the police commissioner and the chief constable meet Hindu leaders urgently. Unfortunately, this was overshadowed when certain faith organizations made comments claiming it to be a faith-related communal issue. The unsubstantiated, unverified, and callous statement made by a particular police officer in which he stated that anti-faith slogans were raised during India's win over Pakistan exacerbated the situation, and this police statement spread like wildfire. We challenged the police on that, which resulted in them acknowledging that they had made a mistake, and they issued a withdrawal of that previous statement. But the damage was already done. This has since led to religious extremist elements making all sorts of claims against the Hindus of Leicester on social media and issuing fake videos and vile threats. The British Hindu Voice wrote again to the police, pointing out the dangers of the messages circulating on social media, and they requested urgent action be taken against those who were circulating fake messages. BHV pointed out to the police that the focus of the extremists had been to create a narrative against the Hindus using the Hindutva label. These disturbances have given them the opportunity that they have been waiting for to portray Hindus as extremists, both nationally and internationally. Amongst many Hindus, the Daman community was the hardest hit by these riots. While certain leaders of the Hindu community were busy issuing statements from their cozy environments, the grassroots people were being attacked and their houses and properties were being vandalized on the streets. Instead of wasting time on such statements, which did not have much impact on the youth, British Hindu Voice held meetings urgently with the key members of the Daman and Diu communities, including their younger members, and arranged meetings to discuss their concerns directly with the chief constable. This helped quite a lot in terms of assuring the youth that the police would listen to their concerns also. However, after a few days, the situation worsened when further false claims were made in social media about 3 Indian men trying to kidnap a 15-year-old schoolgirl, and this was followed by other fake claims. This raised tensions, and extremists started to come to Leicester making all sorts of threats against Hindus through speeches on Leicester streets and postings in social media. The religious flag burning incident outside the Shivalaya Mandir on Belgrave Road and in front of police officers made the situation worse, and this issue then became an international issue. The root cause of the problem was the fueling of tensions by extremists who wanted to create a negative narrative about Hindutva and poison the minds of young people through hateful speeches, both on the streets and on social media. Throughout the disturbances, BHV constantly stayed in touch with the Chief Constable, who to his credit acted quickly on the concerns that we raised. BHV believes that quicker actions on those hate preachers of social media who circulated fake news against Hindus would have lessened the impact and the duration of the disturbances. Also, a more measured approach by Hindu faith leaders taking into account the wider agenda of the extremists when making statements of remain calm would have been more helpful. British Hindu Voice in Leicester condemns the false narrative being created by extremists linking Leicester's Hindus with RSS and BJP. By playing the Hindutva trope and portraying themselves as victims, the extremists have shown they are not interested in peace in Leicester. They want to use the Leicester disturbances for a different reason. BHV calls for an independent inquiry to be set up by the Home Secretary to look into the causes of the disturbances, the roles played by social media, the use of communal tensions to bring in the issues of the Indian subcontinent to the United Kingdom. The dialogue between British Hindu Voice in Leicester, the police and Hindu youths is ongoing because we believe this to be the only way to achieve long-lasting peace on the streets of Leicester. Yours sincerely, Vinod Poppet, British Hindu Voice, Leicester. Vinodji, as I mentioned, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your account. I know there is much more to be revealed and disclosed, but that will certainly, I think, go a long way to helping assuage the concerns of the young men from the Hindu community, the Daman and the Diu community, who very much felt isolated by the manner in which the response seemed to target them, but without accommodating a totally different dimension. Thank you also for bringing to light some of the concerns that you'd already raised about the cricket match and the alleged instances which supposedly sparked off the whole issue. It's appreciated. I'm going to turn now to another eyewitness, a person who is from Leicester and who, one, was a first-hand eyewitness to what happened, but also has been doing a lot of work to do with trauma counseling, to do with support, to do with connecting with the Hindu community, which to a large degree is still traumatized. This person, like many other persons in Leicester, is unwilling at this moment to reveal her identity, and so we'll be referring to her as Speaker One. Speaker One, are you able to unmute, please?
Yes, I can do.
Excellent. Thank you. Please, yes, so if you'd like to share your statement with us, you're broadcasting now.
Thank you. Jai Shri Krishna and Jai Shri Ram. Thank you to Panditji and Kapilji and the rest of the panel today for giving me this opportunity to bring you the true experience of the victims. Over the last few weeks after the attacks, I have been working with the Daman and the Diu community. Who are these people and what is their background? Let me tell you something about the Daman and Diu community. They have been arriving in the UK over the last 20 years. Some came during the EU free movement in Europe, as Daman and Diu are part of the Portuguese colony. They are the most hard-working community in Leicester. Many of the youths that were involved in the peaceful protests have grown up in the UK and in Leicester and are attending college, or many even working. They have been labelled as New Age Hindus from India who are BJP and RSS fascists, which is not true. While supporting them, I have found that many live in fear of being attacked in their homes or going to work in the early hours in the morning. They just don't feel safe anymore. Many have been forced to leave their homes for their own safety. Their cars have been vandalized only because they have a Ganesh Murti in their car for good luck. Many have removed bunting from the front door of their homes so that they are not identified as Hindus. Stickers have also been removed from front doors. Why should we need to do this? They now go out in groups to stay safe. Why have they been singled out? Who is to be blamed for the racial attacks? It's not them, it's us. A Hindu is a Hindu. I feel for the family who had eggs thrown on their puja for Sri Ganesh Chaturthi and their homes vandalized. A young boy had to run for his life as those hooligans had knives on them. Why have these stories not been published in the press? This is just a small amount of the stories. I have many more. This community is very hardworking and make sure they are part of society. Are Hindus committing a crime for celebrating their festivals in the open? They have been celebrating our festivals for many years outside their community hall and temples, but why this year it has become a problem? They seem to have restored a sense of pride within the Hindu community. I have heard from many people in Leicester who feel the same. During Navratri, I have been driving around Leicester to see how many police officers were around the temples and the community centres. Is this how we have to live? I asked many of them to come out in the open to speak, but there is too much fear now. There is still a lot of work to be done with them. Many are traumatized to even speak up or give their story. However, they have full faith in the police. As a resident of Leicester, I would like to say a big thank you to this platform, as I have been able to be their voice and share a small part of their experience, which is even deep-rooted, and I wish to find out more from them soon. Thank you, Panditji.
Lionessji, thank you very much. It brings back to my memory, your account brings back to my memory some of the witness accounts that I was hearing when I last visited Leicester. And also thank you for highlighting the fact that this is not finished, it's not over. There is still a community who have experienced trauma and continue to experience trauma, and also are in fear of the consequences of them projecting and portraying their identity in public. You mentioned Ganesh Chaturthi and Diwali, Navratri. All of these are events where Hindus celebrate very publicly. We enjoy the very fact of our existence and celebrate the manner in which we work together, share together, and contribute to society together. There is music, there is laughter, there is song, there is dance, there is light. All of those things that add meaning to existence. And it does seem that this factor is going to have to be considered. Our very public displays, where we invite the community and show to the community how to raise spirits and energy and laughter and community cohesion itself. It does seem that some of these activities are being frowned upon by persons of other groups who perhaps do not support this manner of exhibiting our identity and enjoying exuberant religious celebration. This is something that has to be revisited. Speaker one, Lionessji, thank you very much for that. You mentioned full faith in the police. I'm going to ask our next speaker, who is a human rights lawyer and has extensive experience of working within the police system, the criminal prosecution service. And it's a gentleman, Vinod Sharmaji, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about what needs to happen after an incident has occurred. It's not enough for the police to have attended, and then we cannot just leave them to allow it to go through. There are many, many hurdles yet to be overcome. So I'm going to invite Vinodji to speak with us on this subject. Vinodji?
Hello, Namaste, Satish Ji. Can you hear me loud and clear?
We can hear you, yes,
Yeah,
thank you, loud and clear.
Thank you for inviting me on today to speak. And really what I wanted to just say is this, you know, my role as a lawyer, you know, dealing with human rights and criminal law has been dealing with clients over the last 25 years. I don't really know much about what happened in Leicester and Birmingham and other places. And you know, I've only learned from social media, but I just wanted to say, first of all, it's very shocking to hear about this. And I think it's very terrible that different communities don't seem to be getting on. And I think by and large, in general, there's good, you know, community relations between different communities in Leicester. And this is probably just, you know, an incident that's happened for some reasons. It probably needs to be further investigation. I don't know the facts, and I've just been looking at social media, and I think a lot of the facts are distorted. I think as far as the police are concerned, you know, we rely on the police, you know, to protect us and, you know, uphold law and order. And it's a difficult job for any police officer, you know. I wouldn't like to do it personally, you know, and be on the front line. And I think at the time there was, you know, the Queen's death as well. So a lot of the resources might have been used up there. But I think we take the police, you know, for granted too much. I think, you know, they have got, you know, various, you know, constraints and requirements they have to, you know, act under. But I think at the end of the day, their duty is to protect people from all communities. And I think there was a failure, perhaps, by the police in the way they dealt with this matter, because from what I could see, a flag was being removed from a religious place and the police were kind of just standing there. Now, I don't have the full facts because I just saw, you know, videos and then, you know, the press kind of joined in and distorted a lot of probably what happened. So I think, you know, we need to be more sort of proactive in sort of challenging the police and asking them, what are they actually doing? I mean, understand there's only been a few arrests. There's been a lot of criminal activity there. And it is a crime and law and order situation, you know, but I think that there are things that have happened where, you know, the police should be under more scrutiny. If a Hindu person has been attacked or assaulted, or if, you know, their religious flag has been removed from their temple, that's, you know, not acceptable. And if they've reported it as a crime, then the police should deal with it and get on with it and prosecute people, irrespective of what race, you know, the perpetrator's from. And I think Hindus generally, they're not sort of very much up on it, you know, when it comes to the police, how to deal with it. They just take it for granted the police are going to turn up and help them. Now, there may be a situation from my experience, you know, when you call the police may actually come and arrest you and charge you for something. You know, they may misunderstand the situation. They may be heavy-handed. They may think that the victim is in fact the perpetrator. And I think we need to be generally, you know, we need to educate, you know, people on what powers they have, what they can do, what they can't do, and, you know, what happens after. If that many people have been attacked, they've been assaulted, they've been abused, and why are the police not taking action? I'm sure they must have plenty of footage there, but where are the prosecutions?
Vinodji, you know? Can I ask you a very specific question?
Yes.
The police have advised us that 9 people have been charged, 52 arrests were made, and I think they've identified 158 acts of criminality. A request was made to the police for them to disclose, in the interests of community cohesion and harmony, more details about the identities. We wanted to know if there was any religious aspect. Remember, at the beginning of this, there were statements made that the very reason behind all of these acts of conflict was a religious reason. The police have refused to disclose that information, and all of the media sources that I've come across, none of them have been able to put that forward. We're aware that the BBC often will dive into a village in the depths of India and be able to pull out the family history, the community, the occupations, the relationships, and everything in great detail. And yet in this event, there is absolutely no coverage and no identification of these factors. Is there an obligation on the police not to do this?
I don't think there is. I think the police should make that publicly available. I think, there's a lot of figures out there. The Home Office publishes figures of, for example, the number of people in prisons, the number of people, from different ethnic categories who have been guilty of offences. So I think that should be publicly available. I don't see why the police should try to hide that. If they feel that it would create more problem, that might be a reason. But I think the police do take record of people's nationality and race when they arrest people. So why that can't be put out, I don't know. And I think probably you would have to raise that with the police. And if the police still don't reveal it, then maybe there's some kind of legal redress you can take.
Okay, thank you. This is going to be an ongoing scenario now that a local inquiry has been declared. I understand that the Mayor of Leicester, Sir Salisbury, Sir Peter Salisbury, I think, or something like that, is actually undertaking an inquiry. Now, this is a local inquiry. It's almost akin to it being a council inquiry, I guess. So we've got a long way to go yet, and the Crown Prosecution Service have yet to be involved. And I know that they balance resources and probability of prosecution and a successful prosecution. So all of these factors are going to come into this. In your experience, as members of the community who were targeted, do we need to actually monitor each and every step of the way, this whole process? Do we need to make them aware that they are being scrutinized, and we're hoping that they will live up to the highest standards that we expect of them? Or can we just allow the system to run its course and take care of us?
I think there's a danger here that if you just, allow the system to run its course, and the system's supposed to be fair, the CPS look at all the evidence. They're more concerned about what evidence there is and can we bring a prosecution? So they're acting kind of on behalf of the police, whereas the police come out, enforce law and order, then they pass it on to the CPS and the CPS prosecute. So they're looking at, can we get convictions? And sometimes you have to provide the evidence, to the Crown prosecution to make them do their job. You have to be very, very proactive. Otherwise, they will just leave it. That's my personal experience from people who have been victims of crime. They have got a duty to keep in touch with the victim and to offer support to the victim. Now, there may be people there who didn't report crimes as well. So that's important that, you can dial 101 or 999 if it's an emergency, or go online, report the matter to the police and get a crime record, if a reference number. And then if the police don't act, you can complain to a more senior officer, or there's an independent body you can complain to. Then when you go to the CPS, you can do the same sort of thing. You can challenge them and say, well, we can have a review. Why was this case, a particular case, why wasn't it prosecuted? And there's a procedure for that. So we should follow that as well. But I think the community has to be proactive, and it shouldn't be the case that crimes have been committed and people have not been prosecuted. But gathering evidence is one thing that the community can do. So if there's video footage, etc., that should be supplied carefully to the Crown Prosecution Service or the police.
So I do understand that organisations like British Hindu Voice, Insight and Reach and other organisations have been on the ground gathering a lot of evidence. But thank you for emphasising that it's not enough to just allow the system to take its course.
That's right.
Limited resources do play a part. But what I really don't want to see, though, is because the Hindu community doesn't make a lot of noise, that its rights get demoted and fall to the bottom of the pile. Somebody commenting on this a short while ago said, in many of these situations, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So we have to make sure that they're aware that we want to see results. In fact, a successful outcome can only be claimed to have been achieved when the people in that area feel safe to continue with their lives in that area. Anything short of that, I have a suspicion, could be deemed to actually be participating or contributing towards the ethnic cleansing of Hindus from that location, and that mustn't be allowed. And hopefully members of all communities will appreciate the necessity for diversity, and all communities will step forward to make sure that the community who were targeted, they are welcomed, that they are not feeling threatened, that their children can walk to school and participate in events as they always have done. Anything less than that is not justice. Vinodji, thank you so much for that. We'll pop
Thank
your
you.
links into the description at the bottom. One thing that you highlighted to me when we were having a conversation, which I think is worth probably putting out there, especially for our young people, if under any circumstances you are arrested, please do not speak without a lawyer present. Please do not try and indicate or give evidence of your innocence or otherwise. It's not as simple as that, and please do make sure that you get in touch with legal representation prior to making any statement whatsoever. That way you will be protected, the community will be protected, and indeed the police as a service will also be protected. Vinodji, thank you so much for that. Before I move on to our next speaker, Kapilji, would you like to comment anything on what Vinodji has just shared with us?
Well, I think one of the things that's coming across quite clearly, and as you know, I've been monitoring a lot of the efforts at grassroots as well. And I spoke to Vinodji, both Vinod Sharma and Vinod Popar as well. And it's quite clear that there was a failure of policing. I think sometimes we have to be blunt with our language. I'm sometimes rather taken aback that as Hindus, we try and protect the sentiments of everyone at the cost of things to ourselves. I'm not one of those people. So I'll be very blunt here and I'll say that there was a failure. Police failed in the first 5 minutes and they continue to fail. They're failing today. So when people say that they were there to protect, they were there to protect because they failed in the first place. I mean, basically, we've reached a stage where for Hindus to actually rejoice, to celebrate anything in a mandir, it'll actually require police presence. Are we actually saying that in this country, we are rapidly reaching a stage where 24/7, 365, police will actually have to be outside our mandirs just to protect us? We have to be in a position to say to the police and demand and say, we are legitimate citizens, law-abiding citizens. And if there's a community that deserves protection, it's ours. And therefore, let's nip this in the bud. We know exactly what the issue is. We know what the problem is. The police know what the problem is. Appeasement has never worked in the past. It will never work in the future. And I think sometimes we actually have to put the police on the back or on the fire itself. They need to understand that, sorry, but we do have expectations and we do demand that. So one of the things that's coming across from both Vinod just said and what the lioness actually said to us as well, speaker one, is that there are people living in fear. That's a failure. Until we understand the failure and the causes of that failure, we cannot actually respond and actually get an answer. So I think just based on that and my personal observations, and I've written about this very bluntly as well, I think sometimes making it clear explicitly to the agencies is much easier and much better for our community.
Thank you very much, Kapili. I'll come back to you towards the end of our session. We're running a little bit late due to the stream being compromised earlier, but we're catching up fast. Our next speaker is going to introduce another dimension which has been missing. As a community, we have been very successful in just getting on with being a dharmic community. And one thing we have always neglected is making arrangements for our own protection, making arrangements for creating mechanisms, groups, people, identifying people who would be able to act on our behalf whenever the community was under a problem, was targeted. Arif Ajakiaji is a well-known human rights activist. He has been to Geneva, I think, Arif. You've been to Geneva to present some lobbying to the United Nations. And this is one area where, as a community, we have actually really neglected our own activities. We have not paid attention to that. So Arifji, would you share with us your observations about the Hindu voice at the United Nations, the need for formal activism, and the need for communities to start to work out how to fund mechanisms for their own protection? Arifji.
Namaste, Jai Shri Ram, Panditji and everyone. Thank you very much for having me on this platform with such distinguished people. Panditji, I've been working in United Nations and international fora since 1994. And one thing that I have noticed is that there is no Hindu presence on international lobbying. The biggest problem, I think, that Hindus who are living abroad, in India also, but Hindus living abroad, they try to portray themselves as secular. And in a way, they want to show that, no, we are not very religious people and this and that. It's not a matter of being religious or not religious. It's a matter of defending your belief. And secularism, according to United Nations or international language, secular can be a state, not an individual. Because an individual is either Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Christian, atheist. He has a belief. But state can have secularism as a state policy because a secular state treats everyone equally. But unluckily, our Hindu brothers and sisters, they portray themselves as secular, making them more comfortable among communities. Speaking about lobbying, when there was Islamophobia resolution in United Nations last year, we started saying that why there is no Hindu phobia resolution. Well, there is a lobbying behind that Islamophobia resolution. Even states like Pakistan's Imran Khan spoke about Islamophobia and all these things in United Nations General Assembly sessions. Many other state heads. Then many think tanks are working on this. There are think tanks, there are organizations, NGOs who are working against Islamophobia. Well, I personally don't think that there is anything called Islamophobia, because when you speak truth about some activities of Muslims, they call it Islamophobia. Now, speaking about Osama bin Laden, that he was a global terrorist and he was a Muslim. Now, they will tell me that I'm Islamophobic, but I'm speaking the truth. While there is a global growing Hindu phobia, because, for example, there are no terrorist organizations from Hindu community, but there are dozens of organizations working on Islamic terrorism. Because I will call it Islamic terrorism when you terrorize people on the name of Islam. So they are Islamic terrorists, and then if we call them Islamic terrorists, we are Islamophobic. While there is no Hindu terrorist organization, I can gather information about hundreds of suicide bombings by Muslims. But nobody can name one Hindu who has done suicide bombing. And still we are termed as Hindu extremist and Hindutwavadi and this and that. So there is a lobbying behind that. Now, for example, before 2 weeks, I was in United Nations, Geneva, attending United Nations Human Rights Council session. And there were so many Muslim lobbyists. There were, even from Pakistan, there were Sindhis, there were Baloch, there were Pashtuns, there were people from POK, Gilgit-Baltistan. And then ISI-backed groups, there were hundreds of ISI-backed groups, but not a single Hindu. Now, for example, the Hindus are facing love jihad, Sartan Sajuda, and so many things in India. Hindus are facing in Leicester and UK atrocities by Muslims. Why there is no voice of Hindus? It is not only duty of a country, India, but it is the duty of every Hindu who can contribute in it. Every Hindu should feel it's his responsibility to do some sort of lobbying. Now, for lobbying, you don't have to go to New York or Geneva, or you can do it on your laptop. You can write to human rights subcommittees of every parliament, French parliament, British parliament, European parliament, American Congress, Australian parliament. Write it. A single page letter once a week, sent to different think tanks, Hudson, Dale Carnegie. There are so many think tanks who make policies of different countries, Western countries. Write to NGOs, write to foreign offices of important countries. These are called lobbying. And every Hindu can do it from his own desktop, from his own home. And if there are hundreds and thousands of letters going on everywhere, then people have to listen. People who matter, they have to listen. So I think lobbying is very important, and it is everyone's duty, and we should go forward on it. Regarding this Leicester thing, I was listening to Vinodji and Kapilji and Panditji, and I've been following these incidents also. There are 2-3 things. First, it is police role, then it is media's role, then it is our own community's role. Because I was talking to someone in Leicester, a Hindu, and he said that, well, masla kahan nahi hota, sab jagah hota hai. Why are we exaggerating? We live in peace and harmony with Muslims here, and why everyone is talking about it? Leave it. So this behavior of us since last 1300 years, that's why we are facing these things. Now we have to be very clear in our point of view that yes, we'll believe in coexistence. And Sanatan is only belief that believes in coexistence. Otherwise, other religions, they are supremacist or they have a superior complex. But Sanatan does not say that we are superior. We say that live and let live. But it does not mean that we don't defend ourselves. Role of police, I would say one thing, that having been born in Muslim community, grown up in Muslim community, and police gets careful when they know that, for example, millions of Muslims live in UK. Every household has knives. But we Sanatani, we use it to cut vegetables. So police is afraid that if we will use force against these Muslims, they will become violent, and maybe there is a civil war or insurgency in our country and this and that. For Hindus, even in 200 years colonization period, they never felt fear from Hindu community. They knew that Hindus will never use violence as a tool and this and that. So I think police role was pro-Muslims because they did not want a violence everywhere in the streets. Panditji, I think I will stop here, and then once in further you will.
Thank you, Arif Bhai. I have a question. There was an incident which happened right at the beginning of this, where a police officer broadcast that the claim of death to Muslims had been made and overheard. Now, for a non-Hindu, non-Pakistani, non-Indian, non-Muslim police officer to make that statement, it's not a small thing. It can't just be, or can it, merely a mistranslation. You know, it's such a horrific cry to have made. I can't imagine who would be making that sort of a cry. So where did that come from? You know, this is one of those instances and one of those aspects which causes me to really have a little bit of concern about the professionalism and the attention to detail that's necessary when engaging with such sensitive issues. On the one hand, we have a police force which is saying, we're unable to share with you the identity of the persons because of community cohesion. And yet members of the same police force have made statements which are so inflammatory whilst being completely untrue. Is it right for us to be concerned that the police is acting with bias?
Well, Panditji, one thing I have noticed is that politicians or police or civil servants belonging to Muslim society, they are first Muslim, then British. They are not neutral. While Hindu, if he is given a responsibility, he tries to distance from his own community to show that, look, I'm not favoring my community. Now, for example, how many MPs, Muslim MPs, have spoken on this favoring Hindus? Because I don't ask for a favor, but Hindus were correct here and Muslims were on the wrong side.
So if I can just jump in for 1 second and get this absolutely clear. In the United Kingdom, every public servant and every public officer is required to adhere to the principles that are called the Nolan principles. And a fundamental part of it is to act in a manner which is completely equanimous, with a complete equality, without discriminating in any way, shape or form. Is it reasonable to assert that the way in which the police has acted so far falls short of the Nolan principles?
Well, I think that there are some sections where they do favorism, the police. And maybe for, as I earlier said, that to save people from civil war situation or something like that, or maybe for being Muslim is more important for them than being a police officer. So I watch, for example, there is an MP. She always speaks in favor of Muslims and she never speaks in as secularism. But name me one MP that that speaks in favor of Hindus. Panditji, I think that there was some favorism from police, and yeah.
Well, Arifji, thank you very much for that. I just want to re-emphasize for everybody who's listening, Arif Bhai has made a very, very clear accusation that the Hindu community has been negligent and incompetent in not arranging for its own lobbying and its own activism. The absence of a Hindu voice at the United Nations is a terrible indictment that we have not paid attention to a very, very serious area. Arif Bhai, thank you very much for that. Offline, I would love to have a conversation
I would like
with you.
to add one thing I forgot, that I handed over a petition of Leicester events to special rapporteur of United Nations on freedom of belief and religion. Reach Group, Reach India is a group of Indians working in United Kingdom, had asked me that if you are in Geneva, hand over this. So I handed over it to Mr. Shahid Ahmed. He is a special rapporteur of United Nations on freedom of belief and religion. He belongs to Maldives. So I handed over him to him in United Nations about 2 weeks back.
Thank you very much, Arif Bhai. That's wonderful to know. I'm really deeply appreciative that you actually took the trouble to do that. But I must admit, I'm also a little saddened that we didn't have a mechanism in place for it to be done formally. I would love to take an opportunity for yourself, Kapilji, myself, to sit together and let's see what we need to do now for our little global Hindu federation to attain the appropriate status where we can contribute a Hindu perspective directly at the United Nations. I'm confident that the community has now understood that this is necessary. And if we put the program together, we work out the mechanisms to achieve it, I'm also confident we'll get the support. And with your guidance, we'll get there very, very soon. Arif Bhai, thank you very much for joining us this morning and for your contribution. It's much, much appreciated. We're now turning to another participant, another member of our family, who was very, very active whilst the riots were actually going on. And so we had a situation here where members of our own community were trying their best to contact people, trying their best to get in touch with the police, trying to find out what was going on and to arrange for some sort of activity whereby their interests and properties could be protected, some response from the police. You'll be surprised to hear that in this world that we live in, that we have global allies and that we also have people who are monitoring each other's best interests all over the world. And one such person is a dear friend of mine who I have the pleasure and honor of being able to say that I've known her for almost a decade now. And we have exchanged many views and opinions, and she is one of our staunchest supporters. I'd love to introduce you to the Director of Hindu Human Rights in Australia. And Sarah, are you able to join us now?
Namaskar. Can you hear me?
Namaskar, Sarah. Yes, we can hear you, and we can see you also. So thank you so much for joining us all the way from Australia. I know that it's probably late in the evening and approaching your time to retire, so we won't keep you too long, but thank you so much for joining us at this late hour. Now, I know that you were very active when all of this was actually happening and that you were engaging on a moment-by-moment basis with members of the community, but also with the authorities. Could I ask you to share with us what your experience was with regard to the policing of this event, the communications, the guidance, and the response? Please.
Namaskar. So we're talking about a series of events. So if you read the media, you'll say that it's been about a cricket match. But if you look in history, you'll see very clearly that people have been studying the community relations, the communal relations of Leicester for over a decade. Well, the early reports are there from 2009, and there's been inter and intra-communal tensions for a long time. So this is nothing new. It's just not been monitored in terms of the relationship between Hindus and Muslims, or with the broader community who are not either Hindu or Muslim. So there's been a lot of emphasis placed by researchers, some of which are funded by the Soros Foundation. There's a report there from 2009 that talks about Muslims in Europe, and Leicester was one of the chosen cities. There's been a lot of emphasis on looking at Muslims of Leicester, but I have found less in relation to who the Hindu communities are. Leicester's known worldwide as being one of the places where Hindu festivities are larger, the largest outside of India. So it's got a reputation for being proud of its Hindu cultural heritage, I suppose, and a place where festivities attract people from probably all over England and probably all over Europe. I can imagine that many, with such huge festivals, that you probably get visitors. So it's a tourist attraction. It probably brings money into the town. And there's a lot at stake here, aside from just power and control within the community. Who gets to win the power and control within the community due to these events and how they've played out? Going from the mayor all the way down through to the religious organisations, you can see there's an imbalance of power. There's a lack of voice coming from the Hindu community. There is an open, tacit, and explicit demonisation and vilification of certain members of the Hindu community. And I don't think it was helped by the fact that there was a lack of Hindu voice. So when these incidents started playing out, and I'm not going to give a start time, but I am going to say that I was monitoring this from the 6th. So the minute somebody sent me a WhatsApp message with a video of a Hindu home being attacked, it was the 6th of September. And already there had been mobs gathering in the streets. Already there'd been Ganesh Chaturthi. There was a Ganesh Pandal attacked with eggs. There was already an incident of violence. There was an incident of a Sikh apparently having his shirt torn. So these are backdrops. But before that, there were incidents of temple attacks and hate crimes, which you can find just by, anybody can find them. So it's quite astonishing the media hasn't been able to dig any of this up. If I can type a few lines in from Australia, and up comes years, going back to 2017, of Hindu temples being intimidated or harassed. So this is nothing new. So I want to put it in that context. If it's nothing new, then why was it so difficult for the police to respond to this in an appropriate way? Well, I would argue that they knew, and I'll say what they knew because I told them what I know what they knew because I know what I told them. So from the 7th of September, I was tagging them, and if you go onto my wall, you can see 300 messages, tweets with tags. Some of them are quite important sets of information, and some of them are just ongoing messages or threads. But the police were advised on my wall, and what I couldn't tell them publicly because I didn't want them to know I had accessed some information that I shouldn't possibly have known. I told them through email, and I also phoned them. Okay, so from the 14th to the 20th, I phoned or emailed them 11 times. I had personal conversations with the police in Leicester 5 times, and I had emails with confirmation, sending them screenshots of people escalating communal violence and hate toward Hindus. So that started from the 14th of September. So they knew that these people from Birmingham were planning to come down and chop up Hindus. They were planning to go and take out their anger against them for being Hindutva, RSS, whatever, extremists. We know they'd already been patrolling, so we had Muslim patrols before that. So, you know, apparently, you know, the police knew that they knew that this was coming, okay? But what they didn't know was that the Hindu community were organising a protest. But my question is, if they knew that these people were coming, what did they expect? Did they really think that 30, 40, the 40 people that came from Birmingham would not be joined by local Muslims from Leicester to actually build up their forces? I don't know how many were originally from Leicester or Birmingham, but there were 30 people tagged in the invitation about this, you know, let's go down, and there were even rape threats. So I said to the police, you know, 14th, I said, Dutch Raja, you know, Norman Khan, these accounts, Luckman Khan, I named the accounts, I sent them the screenshots. I said, these people are inciting hate, they're inciting violence, and they're coming down to Leicester. So that was a few days beforehand, and there was a Navratri mailer. So I assumed that they must have been choosing Saturday to go down because of the Navratri mailer. And there were rape threats in there that we were going to go and get these Hindutva's mothers. So they were going to rape the mothers of the Hindus. So of course, you know, as this escalated over the week, my friend here, Saurabh Mishra, and I, who were watching this very closely across many social media platforms, the responses, the incitement, we were starting to panic. So I had to phone them a few times because I was calling out on media, on social media. You can see that. Where is the Hindu Police Association, and why aren't they dealing with this these constant waves of propaganda, from abduction to Quran burning to pissing on a masjid? That's the language that they use. So apologies for the crude language. There were other accusations that they were disrupting antisocial behavior. But what we actually saw in the attacks were that it wasn't these alleged antisocial people, it was Hindus that were actually victims of these hate crimes. So we were freaking out, thinking, how are the police going to stop them from targeting ordinary Hindus? Because the language they're using, like cow piss drinkers and Hindutva terrorists and Hindu extremists and all of this type of inflammatory language, you can't, I mean, what are the signs of a Hindu extremist? So we knew they were going to go after Hindus. So the police knew, and they knew how serious it was. And they said to me that they took it very seriously, and they gave me all the numbers, and we've, you know, it's all there on the record. So theoretically, if there was an inquiry, they could look, you know, up my name, Hindu Human Rights Australia, and they could find these, right? So I was saying on the night of the event, I was saying to them, this is the group from which these Muslim mobs from Birmingham and Leicester, who knows where they were all from, were organising. So they were saying, come down, we need more, there's not enough here, there's 200 Hindutva extremists and whatever, right? And come down, and then within two hours, you know, the place was packed. And they were bragging about how many there were of them and how few of the others. Now, this was after the police had issued a dispersal order. So they weren't supposed to even be there to begin with. They were supposed to have gone, but what they were actually doing is mobilizing on social media to bring down a couple of hundred more. And why were they coming? Because they were angry. Why were they angry? Because they'd been incited. And how had they been incited? Because there were allegations that, for instance, the traffic warden had been stabbed by a Hindutva extremist, and they were being spread on some organisations, which I would like to know if they're taxpayer funded, spreading this type of disinformation. So I was tagging the police on social media saying, can you please deal with this? This is propaganda. Can you please ask these people to stop escalating? Now, there should have been some type of an incitement charge which was applicable to those parties using social media and amplifying tensions, especially when the responses that they were getting were violent responses. Like, we are going to come down there, we're going to chop them up, these Hindu, etc., etc. Nasty, violent, anti-Hindu language combined with violent threats. This is outside the parameters of freedom of speech. This is where hate speech and incitement to commit a hate crime actually is embedded in your law. So that's all there, and this all can be obviously reported. But so you can see that I'm in Australia. So if me and my friend, my colleague, he's a professional, mind you, we're both professionals. We can do this and monitor this from Australia. We don't get paid for this. This is saver. We had almost a month of sleepless nights monitoring this. But what I found from the Hindu community was I was begging them, please respond to this, because this is dangerous. This is going to put lives at risk. And the kinds of responses that we heard were often, we stand with our Muslim brothers and we're one people and we won't allow these outside people to come in and disrupt us. And the kind of information that was for like 1 or 2 years after you'd been doing mediation, and you worked through your troubles and you'd resolved them and you said, okay, look, we've come up with a solution that both of us are happy with. It wasn't something that you can just suffocate all conversation with and say, it's all right, we're one. That's not how things work. And what that does is it creates an illusion, like a smoke screen, so that what then happened was, because Hindus weren't contributing to the conversation, they got their way. And as you can see, there's dozens and dozens of media articles now. I said to the community, I said, if anyone's in London, go down there and take footage. Why? Because there was no media on our side. And there's nobody documenting this. So someone, not only one person, but probably a whole range of people could have gone down there and taken their mobile phones, their professional cameras. They could have stuck a media thing across their chest so that they were, like worn a hard hat, taken safety precautions, but they should have been there so that they could see, document, and so that the story that was told wasn't one-sided, because they've managed to turn documentation of their hate crimes into some kind of gleaming prism of unity. And that's because professional communication skills are not there. Professional media skills are not there. Understanding conflict, understanding how to resolve conflict, those skills are not there. And a lack of confrontation of conflict is actually a type of passive aggression. It actually is a type of aggression in itself. And if you leave a conflict and you don't deal with it, you're creating more conflict. So it's actually created more conflict. And we're now in a very dangerous, volatile sort of atmosphere. And that's partly because the police didn't take it seriously. They didn't, and I'm not saying that they didn't care. I think they did care, but they didn't act in the way that I asked them to act, which was to get their terrorist squad down there. They needed to get terrorism into their social media groups and watch them, because I was concerned that there were extremists in those groups actually antagonizing. And I was very seriously concerned about that. And we did see extremists. So I was right to be concerned. And I said, you get your terrorist squad, right? Get them into this groups and monitor it. And obviously, I just imagined that they would have the right police there. I just assumed that because I'm in Australia, and that's what we would have done. We would have had the right police there, or on you know, waiting to on standby, waiting to come out, you know, with their horses, with whatever weaponry they needed, to you know, tamp the crowd down, because this was a situation where a kid nearly got lynched. Like, we're talking about people's lives here. We saw we saw a bunch of men rolling a car, right? Rolling a car and going to drag a young man who was driving home out of his car because he was identified as a Hindu. That hasn't even made the media. So, you know, these are the kind of things that, how did it happen? How did it happen? Because they weren't prepared. So they weren't prepared for the Hindus to turn up, and the Hindus should have given them notice. I think that was irresponsible, because they knew, if they knew that the others were coming down, then they actually, you know, could have helped the police and saved all of this trouble. Not necessarily saved all of it, but at least had more police forces there. But at the same time, the police should have known that they should have gone out and liaised with the community and said, hey, are you guys planning on doing anything? We've heard that, you know, have you heard anything's going on Saturday? Get out there. So there is this fantastic guy who's really nice. His name is Ranjit Sanigra, and I've spoken with him. He's a police liaison. He said that he will be able to give advice to the Hindus on what their rights are, what their legal rights are. And I've asked, you know, whether he can help the Hindus to do some community safety programs, because there needs to be like neighbourhood watch, which the police normally run. There needs to be community forums where the police are involved and they get the communities together. And I'm not just talking about Muslims and Hindus. I'm talking about Muslims, Hindus, Christians, atheists, the whole community, every single stakeholder, because every business, every person who lives in that community is actually part of that community. And looking at it just through this prism of Muslim and Hindu is like really like not reflective of the city and the health of the vibrancy of the city. I mean, I've seen comments about anti-immigrant sentiment. That's it. I've had comments about anti-immigrant sentiment. So that needs to be looked at, because if they're not included, the ordinary community are going to be, you know, they feel like they're not included in the interest of their town. So it's part of their life as well. So I think it needs to be dealt with. And two more things that people are already afraid to report. They don't necessarily have the skills and the knowledge or the language to report. Some do, some don't. They're already afraid. Okay, so we need a Hindu hate crime officer. It's absolutely vital, because they're not going to go to a Muslim in a situation where there's animosity between Hindus and Muslims. It's just totally unreasonable to expect the Hindu community to trust a Muslim to report a hate crime which may be conducted by a Muslim. Whether or not she's good at her job is totally secondary. I'm sure she was chosen because she was the best fit for the job. But at the same time, it's not going to assist Hindus to come forward. And the other thing is there's an investigation going on, and I heard the council, the mayor saying they want it to be dealt with within 2 weeks or a few weeks. How are they going to conduct an investigation before the court has done its job? We don't know what happened until the court's done its job. We don't know what happened until the police have gone through 6,000 hours of footage. You cannot conduct an investigation within 2 or 3 weeks. It takes me 2 or 3 weeks to write a report based just on the social media. You know, 6,000 hours of footage, matching identities, recording, coding. It's just not possible. It needs to be done in due time. So that's my my synopsis.
Reggie, thank you so much. On behalf of all of us here, and on behalf of the Hindu community, but also all of the Leicester community who want a return to peace and tranquility. Again, thank you very much indeed. Before, please don't go away. If you can stay a little bit longer, that'd be really appreciated. I'm just going to have one or two questions that we'll put to the panel shortly. But before we get to that particular stage, I want to re-emphasize to every single member of our Hindu community who are watching this. Right, Sarahji, people like Sarah, people like Arifai, people like ourselves, we do this because it is seva. And we do it more often than not at significant risk, but also at significant expense. One of the evolutionary steps that our community has to undertake immediately is to recognize that we need to direct community resources towards our own protection. Sarahji has just highlighted a couple of things that we have to have. We have to have somebody, an officer, who is equipped and supported to be able to deal with Hindu hate crimes, Hindu-related hate crimes. That has to be provided. We have to have a mechanism to have our voice heard in every forum, right the way up through to the United Nations. It's imperative that people like Sarahji, who do this work because they are so concerned about the future for Hindus, they should not be doing this work on shoestring budgets. They should not be doing it and funding it themselves. So I'm going to give a shout out now to everybody who is watching us. If you have a look at our GHF platform, we have the mechanisms already set up, and many people, since we've actually published these articles, have started to contribute and to make a supportive gesture. This is something that everybody can do. The number of times people have said to me, Stacey, what can we do? What I want to do something. Well, the first thing everybody can do is to make a small contribution. It doesn't need to be a huge contribution. If all of us are putting in small contributions, then we as an organization, we as a group of people working in this space, we can work out how to make sure that teams which are working in our best interests expand, that they have the technology, they have the infrastructure, they have the support staff to be able to do this work seriously and to do it properly. And so please, everybody who is watching, I know that Sarahji, people like Sarah, people like Arifai, they would never ask for donations. And so somebody shameless has to do this. I do not want to see them struggle in the manner that they've struggled to support us. So please, let's make this change happen. To give you an idea of how other communities are doing this, the Jewish community have a security trust. They have been facing similar, if not virtually identical threats for a long period of time. The Community Security Trust in the United Kingdom are recipients of over £10 million of state funding every year. And it's thoroughly warranted, it's thoroughly justified. Remember, this is not a contribution that is made out of the public purse, because the Jewish community, like the Hindu community, pay extraordinary levels of taxation as well. This is our own funding, our own money, which is being directed towards our own support. We want to be able to get to that point where we too are receiving funding in that same way. But to get there, we need initial funding from the community. So Sarahji, thank you very much again for joining us. And as I say, it's so late over where you are. We really do appreciate your participation and your support. And I'm confident that we're going to be able to work on other projects. I know there's an exciting project that we've already made significant progress on, but we're not yet at liberty to talk about it. But we will very soon organize a session where we can disclose the progress we've made on that critical, pivotal project as well in the near future. If you have any closing remarks, please feel free to just raise your hand and say, I'd like to add something else if anything occurs to you. Otherwise, I'm going to pop over to Kapilji and just ask Kapilji for some closing remarks before we then conclude.
Jai Shri Krishna, thank you very much for that, Satishi. I think one of the positive things that's actually happening now is that through this particular focus that you actually put together and to bring together some key experts from within our community and across communities as well to discuss what's been going on. It's beginning to allow us to voice those concerns that hitherto have remained silent, have been hidden from those people who really should know what's been going on. Arishi actually mentioned that one of the biggest drawbacks that we got as a community is that we actually think that we are secular. And it's the state that is secular. We ourselves actually have our own identity. And if we haven't got the guts to actually protect our own identity, our own culture, our own language, our own history, who do you think is going to come to our rescue? We actually have to do something for ourselves as well. Sarah J actually literally right across the globe can actually see what's going on. She's literally telling our police on a minute by minute basis, you better get your act together. And what do the police do? They do nothing. And I say this, and that's why I said very early on, it's a policing failure. And the reason why we should lay the blame precisely where it should be is that it started with Islamists attacking Hindus, and that was expanded dramatically because of policing failures. Let's get the narrative correct, and let's actually say to the police, you got it wrong. Appeasement will not work. We will not accept this level of incompetence and negligence by the police. And we have to take this message directly to the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, and to say, get your act together, get your police forces to actually do what they should be doing. Because if they don't, as Sarah said, lives are in danger. Do we actually have to see the death of Hindus on our streets, blood on the streets, before someone actually wakes up and says, we better do something? No, the time is now, the time is right. And I think the notion that we as a community need to come together, we need to raise the funds in order to actually protect ourselves, in order to present our own narrative, in order to make sure that we lobby correctly at all those international fora. That is crucial. Why have we, as 850 million Hindus across the world, not been able to do that? We got Hindu billionaires giving hundreds of millions of pounds a year to British universities. And these same universities come up with research which is anti-Hindu and anti-India. Sometimes you have to sit back and say, my word, this is madness personified. So I think this is a very good start. I hope that this video goes throughout the world. I hope it actually goes to those people who really should see this. I hope those decision makers who are actually hidden because of their appeasement mode actually look at this and they say to themselves, this is not going to work any longer, because the Hindu community is not just waking up, but they're actually literally on the cusp of taking this matter forward quite dramatically. And if that is the case, let's do so collectively, and let's do so across the globe as well. Thank you.
Kapilji, thank you very much for that. Sarahji, I'm just going to invite you to make a closing remark.
I just want to make a point here, and that's that we know what's going on. We were there, we weren't there, but we were watching. So everything that happened on social media, the people who were there, they know what was going on. And in this particular case, it's the worst case of anti-Hindu hate and violence that we've seen in England for a very long time, perhaps decades. And we're not going to sit here and allow the media, the police, politicians, Muslim community groups, Hindu community groups, any community groups, the universities, the university academics, no matter how good you are, if you come out with lies, we are going to pull everything you've said apart. So don't do it, because if you do that, it's going to affect you. We don't want you to lose your position or your authority. We don't want anybody's jobs to be on the line, but we do want justice, and we will get it.
Thank you very much, Sarahji. And thank you for concluding it with such a direct and simple statement. It's been very educative for all of us to actually see how so many people have stepped up and proliferated with no justification, harmful material, the fabrication, the presentation, the prevarication, the misdirection, the sleights of hand. All of these things have been broadcast, and we have now got a mountain of evidence, and it is a question of wading through it and making sure that justice is not just delivered, but seen to be delivered as well. This Leicester issue is, I'm fairly sure, going to be a catalytic case It's going to be a pivotal event that has occurred. And the manner in which it's concluded is going to set the direction with which community interaction, interfaith, cohesion, every aspect of our existence in the United Kingdom and elsewhere, I think is going to be influenced by the outcome of this. And so it's vitally important that we all engage with this issue. Saraji, Arif Bhai, thank you. Arif Bhai, would you like to make any closing remarks? If not, then I can move to a conclusion.
Panditji, just want to thank you for inviting me for this important event. And one thing is encouraging, that there is a new phenomena that Hindus have stood up. Hindus are now talking. Hindus are now protesting. Few Hindus have stood up, but yet there are Hindus now protesting. And that is encouraging. More and more voices have to come out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arif Bhai. I know that many of us follow your talks and your work and the passion with which you have engaged in defending Satya, defending what is real, defending what is right, defending what is just. And it's not an easy task to do. It takes courage and it takes a personal decision. And all of us who have followed you, we certainly salute the courage with which you have decided to speak on so many issues and so many fora. Thank you very much, Arif Bhai, and I look forward to speaking and having you join us on future programs. I'm reminded, I've just had a message and I've been reminded that Sarah, do take a little bit of comfort in that there were people there who had teams gathering data. Insight had a team on the ground and they've been compiling a lot of data. I know that arrangements have been made for a number of people who were the targets of this hate speech and hate violence to have legal representation. I know that there is a conversation going on with law firms who may even be able to provide pro bono or corporate CSR support for this. And in due course, as things become clearer and when it's possible to inform the public about them in the public space, we'll bring that information as well. So work is being done and your guidance, your support and your direction is being acted upon. So thank you for that. It's been quite a session this morning. Firstly, I'd like to just again briefly apologize for the technical issues at the beginning. Hopefully, everybody who is participating, watching, will engage with us with patience. The technology that we're trying to leverage is significantly technically challenging, but also we have to ensure a level of security, both for the participants, but also for people who are registering and logging in with us. It'll take a little bit of time to get this absolutely perfect. So I'd like to thank you in advance for your patience and for joining and bearing with us while we get these things underway. This has been the second of a number of sessions. The last session was to do with media, and as a consequence of that, we have had a great deal of information shared with us, and we're going to make it available to the government public inquiry whenever that happens, and certainly we're going to make it available to the public inquiry being hosted by Leicester's Council. The next session that we're going to have next Sunday at the same time is going to be a few aspects of it have been touched upon today, but it's going to be community. One thing that this event has really highlighted, it's shown us areas where we're strong as a community, but it's also shown us areas where we have a great deal of work yet to do. We have got to ask questions about how did our organizations respond. We have certain organizations which have claimed a position of leadership locally and nationally and internationally for a long period of time, and they step forward and represent us in very important fora. Equally, they participate and are the recipients of a great deal of respect and support from the community at large. And yet in this particular instance, some aspects I think need to be revisited and scrutinized. That's one aspect we're going to have a look at. Next, we're also going to have a look at the aspect of community engagement with the parliamentarians. Only last week, Keir Starmer in the Labour Party made an announcement that Hindu phobia is to be, I think his specific word was, there is no room for Hindu phobia in the Labour Party. And yet most of us are aware that whilst all of this was happening, those parliamentarians who have enjoyed the support of the Hindu community in Leicester for decades were silent. we need to know why. And so we'll be exploring that aspect next week as well. We'll also be having a look at the manner in which the community's media channels, our own newspapers, our own radio broadcasts, the manner in which our community organizations either performed wonderfully, or if there are any areas where they need to perhaps reconsider how they're satisfying the demand and the need at the time, we're going to explore those as well. So I would invite everybody to join us. If you've registered with our hinducampaigns.com website already, then you'll automatically be receiving an invitation to the stream when it goes live for next Sunday, same time. If you haven't joined us yet, please do register with the website. We will keep you informed about the very key, pertinent and important issues. We will not spam you, nor will we share that data with anybody else. This is part of what we want to do to ensure that our community is moving towards a robust ecosystem. We're building it ourselves. It's appearing in front of our very eyes. Who would have imagined only a few years ago that we would have dear family members sitting across in Australia, monitoring issues that are affecting us here and contributing positively towards supporting our well-being and our future tranquility and prosperity in this country. The ecosystem is appearing in front of our very eyes. Please join in. Please make a Twitter account. Please register with ourselves and with other organizations. We are building this ecosystem. Kapilji, thank you very much for your support and your ongoing guidance in this matter. If you have any last closing remarks, please take a moment to say so, and then we will close the stream. Thank you very much, Kapilji. Kapilji has no closing remarks. I'd like to just finally thank everybody who has participated in the stream. Thank you for those who registered and were patient enough at the outset. But most of all, I want to give a shout out to the Hindus in Leicester, who I think at times felt that they were exposed and that they were alone. That is not the case. There is a great deal of support. There is a great deal of support yet to come, and it will manifest itself over the next few weeks. I know the community has had a great deal of trauma and has been reluctant to articulate its position and indeed its fears and worries. Slowly, over the coming few weeks, we will heal that, and we will get to the stage where those who are the victims of terrorism, because the intention was to inflict terror, those who are the victims of these terrifying hate crimes, they will have the opportunity to speak their voice in a position of safety. And hopefully we can all work towards a much better and a stronger inter-community relationship in Leicester for all of the communities there. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining in today. Jai Shri Ram, Jai Shri Krishna.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.